This is Dr. Batts, and again, I am excited to bring to you another episode of Caring for the Caregiver. Now, in this series, you've seen us interview individuals from all walks of life that talked about their experiences with caregiving, the difficulties, the triumphs, and the challenges that they face navigating the system as it constantly changes. Well, I couldn't do this alone, and when it's always easier when you have someone that's kind of your rock, your anchor. And I've been out for a little while, but he's kept me in the loop. And again, Mr. Williams, just introduce the folks to yourself. So before we hop into this, because I couldn't do this without you. You know that.
Listen at you. Well, I always say nothing to it but to do it. And it is good to see you again.
Yes, sir.
I know we have had some commitments that kept us from teaming up, but we had to do with that individual thing. And I'm Derek Williams. Just as a little background, I used to have a company, and I still do, Get Engaged, Group Innovation and Diversity Training Associates. It's a multidiscipline consulting and training company, focusing on individual, group, and organizational behavior. We talk about performance enhancement, helping you do the things that you do better.
Yes, sir.
Right? With a special twist of cross-cultural awareness, looking at some components of culture to help us understand reality a little better from our cultural experience. America is a multicultural country. Sometimes we scratch our head and ask what's going on, but we've been doing that for a while. And so I integrated that into my work. That's the specialty, because I think we have to appreciate our similarities, but be ready and prepared to talk about our differences. Okay, and I think that we have more in common than we have out of common. Right, but the things that we have in common, we're able to do just fine. But it's when those things get out of sync that can cause the most problems. And so I found that from my worldview, needed to always have that perspective to help us strive to be the country we say we're striving to be. And without that, I don't think we're going to do a very good job. Okay, so my involvement in this caregiving series is personal on one standpoint. It's a professional aspect, but we all bring something real as well.
Yes, sir.
And as you pointed out, our previous interviews you and I have been the lead in getting people to talk about their experience. And when Miss Laura Thompson talked about, hey, what about possibility of y'all talking to each other and maybe even summarizing some of those experiences and what you learned over the past, we've been, I don't know how many weeks. It's been a while.
We've done this for a while. And I think that's one of the challenges, right, is because I think what we've learned over the continuum, at least for myself and of course in our conversations, have evolved. So this might be part one to, a part two, because, on the one hand, when I think about breaking it down, I think at first we were taking a fairly scientific approach, at least for me, because everything that I do, and even our earlier conversations when I listened to those shows, were largely analytic, right? We talked about the socioeconomic components. We talked about the structural components of racism and how they impact it. We talked about how culture changes our care to some degree, meaning what is expected in our community. And then as we kind of anesthetized it in that way, we brought on a different set of guests. Because if you remember, our first set of guests were largely professional who had experienced it, but they were people that had this structure. And then, I can remember one guest that talked about having a calendar. The single most important tool was having that calendar, right? And that calendar served as not only a target for timing and benchmarks and different things, but it allowed you to see just how long this process had been going on. But then there was a shift in the show, right? There was a shift where we brought on people that were either personally experiencing the process of caregiver, getting care themselves. And I think from each of those two unique experiences, we can kind of juxtapose some different ideas.
Okay.
And I know you had alluded to just before, and if you feel comfortable sharing, just how your process has been in this one role, then another role, and then adult children role, and then navigating that. And so can you speak to that?
Yes. There's been a multiplicity of different things that as I reflect back, Dr. Batts, I realize that my own life experiences is what basically shaped me to who I am. And when I think about caregiving and just being able to adapt to the whole idea of a loved one passing, like to give a little short story just to show how you can carry these things for years. My grandmother was my first experience with sickness and death. And when she passed, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and one of the things we did is that we brought the bodies home, into the home, okay, and we set up, we had a living room, put the casket there, flowers around, and people would come and visit. And I remember that process, and I got through that as a young child. And after the burial and the ceremony was over and all, I began to show some behaviors that my mother got very concerned about. One was I didn't want to go back to that house, okay, where her body was laid out. And it had nothing to do with the fear of death, even though they had to get me to understand that she wasn't coming back. I increasingly stayed away from that house. My aunt owned a home, and she asked me, "Why don't you ever come over and visit?" And I said, I can't handle it. I can't come. And she said, "Well, what is it?" And it took them years before I was willing to share. And what was keeping me from going to that block, to her home, was that when the funeral director had come to put the body in the home, he had brought a wreath, and her name was on it, okay? And my aunt lived in a red brick home, and he had taken a nail, I'll never forget, it was like a number 12 nail, and he had pounded it into the cement, into the that held the red brick, and he placed the wreath on it, okay? Well, when the funeral was over, the interment and all, they took the wreath, but they didn't take the nail out.
Oh,
okay. And every time I would come by that house, I would see that nail, and it would trigger memories and response. And, of course, we didn't have any money for any therapy. Therapy was sitting down with Papa or whatever, and said, "Boy, you better calm out," whatever. Yeah. And I think about that today, and relevant to some of the interviewers that we've had. Sure. How those moments, they extend themselves, they become part of us. And while, the years have been kind and passed, I still think about that, okay? And one of the most important things that I find in our interviews is that the need to talk about our experiences. And don't assume that anyone knows what you're going through. And the childhood experiences. So far, we have talked very little about children and being a part of that process. And I'm an advocate for when a child is ready to learn, then the teacher has to be there. Okay? And so don't use your experience as the mandate pattern for the child. Okay? Children are as different as the snowflakes. Okay? And so one of the things that I have been able to take away is that we have to realize these are lifetime experiences, okay? And that we often, when we say we need therapy, without it, it can impact on our decision-making process forever, for a lifetime. And so one of the things that I'm going to raise during our interviews is to ask, are the children involved? And how are they involved in this process? Are we helping them to adapt to the caregiving aspect of what's going on in the home, but particularly the passing of a loved one? and the tremendous impact that that can have. So one of the things that I have decided to make sure that I include is to look at that family structure,
Right.
and where there are children, to certainly let them be a part of the healing process, the learning process, because this is continuous.
Right.
Okay, if it
Right.
doesn't happen with you, it's going to happen with somebody else. And so that's one of the nuggets that I've taken away. And without my own personal experience, I would have continued just the interviews, and like you said,
Right.
very analytical, scientific. Let's go down the list.
Right.
But I'm glad that has occurred, because I think it has given us some realism and substance that we need to certainly consider in this process.
Yeah, no, and even in your description of that process, right, and how you describe the color of the brick, and how
Yes.
even when you went to do the nail, you grabbed it and the grip on your hand, and you showed pounding into the nail, right? And so just the symbolic component of that,
Yes.
right? When you think about what your grandmother meant, and for many of us, grandmother is that brick, that solid, that foundation.
Wow, what a
and to have a
correlation.
nail that pounded, and just, she was tough, she was powerful, but at some point it broke and it went through. And when it went through, it hung there, and that memory. So I and your story resonates, because there are so many people that deal with the caregiving process that are still seeing that nail. And don't know how to separate the nail to say, yep, she's gone, but she's this.
Wow.
But and we can say all these things, but just the fact that reliving it over and over, and it never goes away. Like, even when I think about my father, the times that we had, but then seeing him, kind of in that frozen state and,
Yes.
and in that space, and I revisited, and I know where the funeral home was. I can remember the smell of the funeral home when I went in. I can remember, like things that my brain tries to suppress. You can't, because they're so big an
imprinted.
impact on you,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
as you highlighted, as an adult, we have ways to compartmentalize and to move forward, and even though it affects us, but I think it is involving others in that, especially the youth, in understanding what that looks like. I think a lot of times we shield the youth because, they can't handle it. I think helping them to see that process, and I know from a cultural perspective, in certain other cultures, that's the expectation, that the little ones bring the water to this, the do.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
and
That's
you
right.
said,
You're
and
so right.
especially
Yes.
part
Yes.
of our
Absolutely.
culture, that process of moving to that next phase in life, right? That next phase is everybody. It's an all hands on deck. But I think here we've, and I'm speaking just from my own experience, we've separated. Okay, no, we're not going to let y'all do. We're only going to do this. Do you think that that's had, at least in even having that conversation, a detrimental effect on us moving forward and getting over loss, especially for our youth?
Oh, I think definitely so. I think definitely so. We talked about having a sense of obligation and responsibility. Sometimes we're not prepared. We're not really the ones
Right.
to take this rock and carry it forward. And yet, sometimes we're the only one that's available. Okay, the impact, for the caregiver, I think is far more reaching than we realize. Okay, we get through an episode, and the idea of you holding on to someone, and yet watching them suffer. You're caught in between. Passing and getting well, and you say, hey, the ultimate relief is transition. And so I think often because of that sense of obligatory relationship, we don't necessarily share what's really going on. The fact that I'm mentioning that today with you, that I chose to bring that forth, talks about it's still very much a part of Derek Williams. Now, I've never had any therapy, but I'm old enough to, I guess, in some sense, to be my own therapist. I've shared it with loved ones as the years have gone by, my wife and my children. But not everyone is able to do that.
Right.
Okay, and so I recognize that.
But I think that's a unique skill that I'm hoping not hoping that I know that what we produce in regards to the show and our interactions have done, right? You've taken that piece, never let it go, which is fine. And what you've done is, as you said, hey, I shape how I interact with other people based on my experiences.
Yeah, okay.
And so now when you look at the product that you put out, I remember as a child, there wasn't a pathway for me. Now, whenever I see them, you said something key, I make sure that the family structure includes the child, right? So it's those steps on how we evolve or how we move from where we were and holding on to that nail, seeing that brick, and now saying, I'm going to take that and let that be a piece of strength for me to build out what I do for other people.
Oh, that's very
right?
insightful.
And so I think it has changed you in that way. And so that's where I think for many people watching this, they don't have to let go of the vision of the nail or the brick. They just have to reframe it. And I think that's the tools that moving forward in our next phase of this, where we start to give them, right? The tools to say, how do we change it? Because you can't forget it. We still remember everything going on. But how do I put that in a way that impacts not only myself, not only my family, but also my community as a whole?
Dr. Batts, that's insightful.
Yes, sir.
It is.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
It is. I we talk about where two or more are gathered.
Yes, sir.
The process of exchanging ideas, because we can get very myopic, and that speaks to relationships. And of course, there's an excellent opportunity for us to build that relationship with loved ones who's part of that team. As I alluded to with my children, I call them frequently.
I was going to say, what are some things?
How you doing? Okay, I'm doing okay, Dad. And I listen and say, well, you sure you're doing okay? Well, I'm having a little, and I think that process is very important because we want everyone to know, hey, we're coming along just fine. And as Dad, I don't hear fine.
Right.
Yeah, and I change your diaper, and I can tell when it's not fine. Okay, whether you're 45, 35, you got kids yourself, and so thank you for keying in on that and giving me some other things to think about as well.
Yes, sir. No, well, thank you. I mean, and I think, as we go forward, there'll probably be more conversations like this where we can pull from what we've gained. I mean, and we really appreciate the guests that come on because, like I said, I think everyone's unique experience paints a tapestry of the variability of caregiving and what that means and how it changes. I told you all in just in lieu of time, but there was a patient that really opened my eyes to the different aspects of end-of-life care. And she was adamant that, this is the last phase, but I'm not driving off the road. But I needed that to hear that this wasn't this somber coming in the room. And I think for everyone, it's a different and unique experience. Well, I know we're close on time and up against the clock. Moving forward, what do you want to see us get to from a show standpoint? Are there any other topics or areas? You talked about children. Anything else you say, hey, let's look at bringing this in or moving forward with this?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. I think the importance in looking at the family structure more. Okay, asking about others that perhaps they didn't mention. Hey, are there children? Is there an uncle and aunt that was part of that process? I think broadening our membership to caregiving and bringing that out if necessary, and not assuming that they're going to just automatically share, but us being the catalyst for finding out what does that team structure from child to brother, sister, no matter what the age, were they part of that process? So that's what I'm getting out of some of the pointers that you have brought from the latent stage.
Wonderful. Well, as you know, we're going to do this journey together, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right. As I mentioned, this is Dr. Batts with Caring for the Caregivers. And as I spoke with Mr. Williams, we talked about another concept. This concept is specifically caring across the continuum, whether that be geography, age, democratic status. What we want to do is really focus on bringing you to a place where you can engage in caregiving at any level. Understand his story about the nail in the brick. I know many of us hold on to that nail and see that brick and don't want to go to those places. But what we want to do is provide an environment where you take that and you use it as strength, not only to help yourself, not only help your family, but also your community. Thank you and have a delightful day.